Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel where we're doing another double feature. This time talking about some big movies that you can see over this weekend from a couple of big directors. But maybe you're not seeing them because the biggest movie of the week is actually like the lowest grossing week for Memorial Day weekend in decades. So it's like a bad weekend for movies, but like good movies are playing in theaters but no one's going to see them. It's that type of week. I feel like this has become a topic going on more and more. Just the state of Hollywood, state of theaters. I get it. It's expensive. There are different types of things people want to see now, and it's just really exhausting. But we're going to talk about two movies that you can see in theaters that I would recommend seeing in theaters because they're big and interesting and cool. Both pretty good for different reasons. We'll be talking Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga from George Miller, and then we're going to jump ship to Richard Linklater's Hitman, coming to Netflix in 2 weeks, but please see it in a cinema before that. Let's start with Furiosa. It is the fifth Mad Max adjacent movie, the fifth one also directed by George Miller. It's his passion project, a thing he's loved, a story he's wanted to make for a long time. This has been a concept he's been toying with forever. He loves this universe, he wants to play with it, we should let him play with it forever. It's really interesting just to see the evolution of what he wants to talk about in this franchise. When you make the first movie, like the original Mad Max, you have a limited budget. You get a little bit more, you make the Road Warrior, you get to make the thing you really want. It gets kind of commercial and different when you do Beyond Thunderdome. And then you get to make Fury Road, which is your big, like, this is how you do the things I've always wanted to do. Play with the things I want to play with, do some really interesting stuff. And that is like a great final movie. If he never made a movie after that, it'd be like the perfect cap off to his entire career. But he made two movies after that. He made 3,000 Years of Longing, which I have covered on this channel, which is a very interesting movie, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. And then he made Furiosa, this new one, this new Mad Max movie, which I'll just straight up tell you, it is more in line with 3,000 Years of Longing in terms of story, the narrative flow of the piece, than it is with other Mad Max movies. Which I think tells you more about like the current era of George Miller we are in than anything else, where he's kind of interested in making a very specific tone, having things feel epic and large in scale in a different way. Not that those other movies aren't epic and large in scale, but they are. But this is more about like the odyssey, the journey, the story, than like the thing we're like used to seeing in Mad Max, or just like the stuff around it, which is kind of an interesting thing. When you have a franchise that is built on the spectacular and the spectacle and the things we are seeing, the story has never been the main focus. But for this movie, the prequel story about Furiosa becoming who she's going to become, story is the main driving point, which is going to be very off-putting to a lot of people coming in wanting a specific thing, because it's doing a lot of different stuff. Now, the stuff it is doing is not uncommon to George Miller. Like I said, it's stuff from like 3,000 Years of Longing, but to the Mad Max universe, it is definitely different. It spans multiple time periods. It is a story that is kind of growing. It's less about the action and more about the characters, which is very interesting to play with. If I had to compare this to another type of movie of the same vein, it is a lot like the Star Wars prequel movies, which I mean this in the most positive way I can. It is taking what you know, trying to expand upon the very specific elements that the filmmaker wants to expand upon. And that's either going to be really cool to see or really off-putting to you, depending on what you want from that. Not that this is like a divisive movie that's going to have people saying it's good or bad or nothing. There's just elements that we're playing with that we don't normally get to see Miller play with, and elements that you wouldn't expect from the Mad Max adjacent world, which is really interesting. This is definitely a guy who wants to take the premise he's built with for 40 years and kind of fully realize it and make it into like the biblical odyssey of a person's journey. That has been like a theme throughout all these movies, of a narrator telling us like this is the journey of this man who did like one thing to help this. But if we look at Furiosa as like one of those characters too, same way we looked at Max, is the journey of her rise, her ascension, her becoming this figure that's going to essentially like save the world, become like this new messiah and like lead the wives of like a warlord to safety and that stuff. And how does she get there? What is her journey to get there? It's an odyssey, which is how they marketed it. It is just like this biblical epic of watching somebody start off as a child, taken from their home, sold into slavery, becoming these different things, building herself up to become the most ruthless and powerful creature that this wasteland has ever seen. And that's a very appealing thing to see. That is a really cool thing to see. And when you have George Miller, who for the life of him cannot make a boring looking movie, you're going to do something sick. The action is very different than what we've seen from previous Mad Max movies. It again, doesn't have the same feel as a Fury Road, but when it goes forward, it does. Like, all of the stuff you like is still there. The big sweeping vehicle shots, the big stunt work, it's all there. There are some more wiry and rubbery looking visual effects, but they really work well for the narrative we're kind of exploring, more so than they would if like those effects were in a Fury Road. None of it looks bad. Sometimes it's just egregiously noticeable, and it looks more like a cleaning wash over like an actual stunt, kind of like the stuff we saw in The Fall Guy very recently, where The Fall Guy was all about the big action, but they also put a lot of just like weird effects over it to make it look weird. A lot of that going on here, which makes me think we're doing a lot more safety-wise, so we have to kind of clean these effects up a little bit more and make them look a little more rubbery, which is good, I guess, because the last production on Fury Road was very hectic and kind of a nightmare. You'd want to kind of tighten up some things when you do a new one. So I can't be mad at that. Everything you want is still there, just beautiful frames and shots that look like they're a painting. Every single thing has insane detail and looks ridiculous. Everybody's got a stupid name, like the new characters are all insane. The old ones are still good. And there's a lot of old ones because it's a prequel. It is a prequel. How do things happen to this character or whatever? It feels less annoying than other stuff we've seen in the prequels, like styling. I think solely because it's trying to tell itself like it's another story within this large mythology. That's like, yeah, you are already aware of the mythos. You know the characters in like the Bible and the people that betray everybody and these types of things. So when you see them on screen, you already know like this is what the Bullet Farmer is going to look like. This is what a Morton Joe is going to look like. This is what Scrotus and Rectus are going to do. You are aware of them because if you treat this like a Bible, if you treat this like it's a history lesson from the history man, it's all going to be things you're familiar with. So when we portray them in new light from a new perspective, it never comes across as weak or uninteresting. It just feels like we're slowly but carefully expanding the lore, which is always good to see. We are introduced to a new actor playing Furiosa because Charlize Theron has aged out of doing the prequel. Maybe we'll do like an old lady Furiosa if, you know, George Miller gets to that point. But it's Anya Taylor-Joy, a young actress who is very talented and has kind of yet to make that big movie. I think her last big one was like The Menu, where people really got to see her like as the lead. She is just great. She is one of the best actors we have today with the biggest eyes. And when you have a character who's as silent as Furiosa, it's all in the eyes. She is so good at just looking through her eyes. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but that's the key point to this character because she wears makeup and mud to cover her face. It has to be the most biggest, beautiful eyes you've ever seen, and she pulls it off well. Not a single part of that looks bad or stupid. She's really damn good at that, and every line of dialogue she has. It's very limited, but she carries it with weight you haven't seen before. And she is committed to the action stuff, to the stunt stuff. We get her to do a lot more like emotional acting as opposed to the physical acting. Not that there wasn't like, you know, emotional acting with Theron, because there was, but this is just like seeing a young person who's going to become the hard-boiled person that Theron's going to portray. And we get to see the people in her life that lead her on that path, starting with Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth, who is just great. I have no bad notes to say on him. Like, this is one of those things where you watch an actor you have seen for a very long time, you just get reminded, like, oh yeah, you're actually good at this. You can actually do stuff. Not that Hemsworth is bad. He's never been truly bad. But you can tell when he's phoning it in. And when you see him fully committed to being like a guy chewing up the scenery, just committed to being the dickhead, the bad guy. It is so good to see, and it just makes you so happy. Man, is he just fantastic. He just comes in and destroys every scene he's in because he's so committed and willing to play this part. It's very impressive. It has been a good year for movie villains who just show up and chew the scenery. We had it in Planet of the Apes. We have it in this. I would say we have it in Dune, and even in like Godzilla. Like the Scar King's pretty incredible too. It's kind of amazing that this worked so well. And we're also introduced to Praetorian Jack, who was played by Tom Burke. I know Tom Burke from some stuff. He was Orson Welles in Mank. He was in that BBC The Musketeers show that I really enjoyed. Just comes in and says, I am going to be your Obi-Wan for a minute. Maybe your love interest, maybe. No, okay. I'm just going to be a cool guy that shows up. And you're like, yeah, you are. You're a really cool guy that just shows up for a minute. You have great chemistry and you're just perfect in this world because you're just angry. And while everyone else around you is just like Dementus or Scrotus or, you know, Piss Boy or whatever, you just have this normal guy who's very attractive, and you just see Anya Taylor-Joy's Furiosa can just connect to him, understand the world because of him, and then move on from there into the next steps. It's beautiful, it's epic, it's truly amazing what we are able to do and what George Miller is still able to do. The fact that in 2024, when this releases, when it's filming in like 2022 to 2023, the fact that we can see Warner Brothers letting this be made is kind of impressive, because it is clearly not going to be for everyone. And that's kind of epic in its own way. Like the story, the narrative flow about it all. A revenge flick like you've never seen it before, some beautiful action, some beautiful characters, and just set design you've never seen. It's amazing. It does fall into some prequel traps, but that's just expected. People have a certain understanding of what a prequel is. How did this thing happen to that person? How did this name come about? Blah, blah, blah. You can move past that and find something very interesting within there, and that's cool to see. I think this is a really interesting attempt that worked for the most part. It's not perfect, but the good outweighs the bad drastically, and I just think this is going to be what a lot of people look back on fondly, and that's cool. That's really cool. So, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, I am going to give an 8 out of 10. Now, let's jump over, like I said, to Netflix, who saw this movie that premiered, was it last year it premiered at Cannes, and they acquired it for like $10 million. This is Hitman. This is the new movie from Richard Linklater, who should, in all respect, get a theatrical release for his movie, but that's not what we're here to talk about. I'm going to talk about it briefly, though, because I'm really upset by it. I had to go to a very shitty cinema to see this because it was only playing in one multiplex in my city. I hate the cinema I saw this in. It just sucks. I wish they just had a big release for this movie. And don't worry, it's just going to be dumped on Netflix in 2 weeks and no one's going to talk about it again. It is a shame that is happening. Sarandos literally just said Barbie and Oppenheimer would be just as big as they came out on Netflix. They wouldn't. Sarandos, you're completely missing the point of what Netflix is. You broke everything. You ruined Hollywood. Thank you for that. But here's Hitman, kind of based on a true story about this guy named Gary Johnson who just, pretends to be a hitman so he can help the police arrest people that are looking to pay for someone to kill somebody. It is kind of weird to think about if you get too deep into the weeds, but that's okay because this is a comedy and it's aware that this is weird and silly. So you have to have fun with it. And I do have fun with it. This is a really good movie. It's Linklater just doing what he's good at. Just putting a camera down, getting some actors to have fun, being silly. And when he gets a guy he likes, he can just do some really incredible stuff with them. Ethan Hawke was one of those earlier guys. And now I think his guy's going to be Glenn Powell because this is a Glenn Powell-led movie. He's been having an incredible run. Top Gun Maverick, Anyone But You. He is slowly becoming our only movie star. And it's kind of amazing that's the case. Now, if this was going to get a proper release in cinemas, where we could let this grow and actually have it flourish, I would, bump him up to the actual status of movie star. But I think between this just being lost on Netflix and Twister's potentially not going to go the favor of those people, it could be lost forever. But this is the type of role, the type of movie where you would just go watch it in a cinema on a weekend and be like, oh, this is a real actor doing a real thing. This is just like watching a guy who you know is a good actor just be a good actor. And that's basically what the movie's about too. The movie is about everybody who plays a character realizing that Glenn Powell is an attractive guy and he can act. Because he's kind of a dorky guy. He likes birds and he owns cats. He teaches at like a college. Just a goofy guy. And then suddenly when he has to pretend to be a hitman, he can play into different characters and put on different accents and voices and just become somebody completely different. And you're like, yeah, that's just acting. He's just a good actor. We're just watching a good actor do good acting. And the world around him is like, man, this guy's a good actor. He's doing some good acting. And that's really interesting. And nobody can play it like Powell because he has the right amount of charm and just the right amount of cockiness to him. He can literally do it all. And it's far and few we see actors be able to do that. So just having him be able to do that, man, is it cool to see. And the jokes pretty much land. There's a couple of silly things where you're like, okay, yeah, this is obvious, but you kind of have to have obvious. It does become like a love story, which is very weird. I know why you're doing it though, because what else can you really do with like that premise? Somebody hires this fake hitman to kill their husband. He starts to fall in love with the person that hired him. That's a basic setup for a comedy. And it's pretty damn funny. Now, the actress that plays the love interest, Adria Arjona, I don't know too much about her. And I feel like this is kind of a thankless role where she just kind of has to be a beautiful woman who can do no wrong and have good comedic timing. I would say for the most part, she does well. There is definitely some parts of their chemistry I don't believe. There's definitely some thanklessness in this role where it's just, here, wear a sexy stewardess outfit and just charm this guy. And you're like, yeah, that's fine, but she could have done more or maybe just experienced things differently. But has writing women been Linklater's, strong suit? Glenn Powell is also credited as like the screenplay writer for this, and I don't know how his writing is going to go. So when you have the director and the actor working on the script together and they're like, what if we get like a hot girl who gets to be hot and not, do much else really? Does that come across as good? It's hard to say. For me, it didn't fully work because you could definitely feel like, oh, she can just stay in this house and be sexy and we could cut back to her having sex with our lead character. And you're like, yeah, you could. Or you could give her more to do and more agency that you kind of brush over so she can get out of one relationship for another. And that's kind of annoying. But it's Powell's movie. And he charms his way through the whole thing, playing so many different characters, doing so many different things. He makes it work. This simple premise that falls into a comical farce, he makes it work. And this movie succeeds on a whole bunch of levels. So that's really cool to see. So, Hitman. It's a hit, man. That joke that everyone's doing. I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.